Spanakopita is a Greek pastry that's usually filled with spinach, but I'm going to change it up a little today by adding some kaleettes, so about 160 grams. Now what I'm going to do is just cut the base off them and then just roughly chop them. I still want a bit of texture in them, so don't finely shred them for this recipe. Now the pastry used when we make Spanakopita is phyllo pastry. I always love to have a bit of phyllo pastry on standby in the fridge because you can make these great little recipes just like this. Now I've been sautéing some onions. You can see they've softened up, so now we'll add our kaleettes. And we'll just toss that and coat it in all of the onion mix. And then I'll also add a good pinch of sea salt and some freshly cracked pepper. Now while that's wilting away, we can get onto the filling, a classic filling of ricotta, some feta. So we'll just crumble that in, use a really nice good quality feta for this. You can see how this is a good quality one because it crumbles quite easily. Now I'm not going to add too much salt to this filling mixture because the feta is really salty, and I'm also adding some parmesan, which is salty too. So just be careful with that. 2 generous handfuls of the parmesan. All right, now we need a binding agent, so just 2 eggs. I'll whisk them together before we add them to the ricotta mix. And we'll add that. Now I'll add some dill to the cheese mixture. I'm just going to finely chop it. We want just a small handful because it is quite strong. It's a very prominent herb used in Greek food. And speaking of prominent herbs, in Greece, they love to use a lot of oregano, particularly dry oregano. So I'll add the dried oregano to our kaleettes. So just a sprinkle in the pan. And you can see that that's wilted nicely, so we'll add 2 large handfuls of the baby spinach. And it seems like quite a lot, but I promise you as soon as that hits the heat, it is really going to cook down. So a quick toss, and then I'm going to turn the heat off. I'll just fold in the baby spinach so it's evenly combined with the kaleettes. And then we need this to cool down completely before we add it to our cheese mixture. Using a whisk, we'll just break up the ricotta and then combine that just so it's really nice and creamy. It smells so good with that dill in it. Okay, now it's time to prepare our phyllo pastry. Now I've brought my phyllo pastry out of the fridge an hour ago just to make it easier to work with. We'll take it out of the pack and then we'll just roll it out. Phyllo pastry is just so versatile when you work with it, and it's going to make a nice base for our Spanakopita, but also we're going to use it on the top so it's going to be super crispy. Now working with 1 sheet at a time, just take that off. You can see how soft and thin it is. We'll just place that on one side and then we'll cover the rest. I've melted some butter, and then with my pastry brush, we'll just brush a generous amount of butter all over the sheet. I've also lined a square baking dish with a little baking paper. That's just going to make it so much easier to take the Spanakopita out once it's cooked. Now once you've added some butter, we're going to fold over the phyllo pastry, and then we'll grab our dish, we'll butter all sides and also the piece of baking paper just for extra assurance. And then we'll add our first layer. Now we're going to work from the center and allow some of the pastry to overhang. The reason I want it to overhang is because once we add the filling, I'm going to cover it with the excess pastry. So I'm going to continue this process until it's all covered down the bottom. We want about 8 sheets in total. Now I've lined this with 8 sheets of phyllo, so now we can assemble. This is cooled down nicely, so we'll add our kaleettes, onion and spinach mixture to our feta and cheese mixture. And I'll remove that whisk, and then we'll just fold all of this together. So all of the veggies are combined with our cheese mixture. This is just so yummy. Now we'll place this into the base of our tin, and we just want to smooth it around so it's quite even. Okay, so using the spatula, get into the nooks and crannies and make sure there's no air bubbles. I want this to be quite compact, so spreading that. And now with all that excess phyllo, we'll just cover it really carefully, pressing down on it so we've got a really smooth, flat top. Now we'll just brush this with some more butter. And then I like the addition of some sesame seeds. I love the nutty flavour of it. So we'll just sprinkle that over the top and they'll stick. And this goes into the oven, 180 degrees for about 35 to 40 minutes or until the pastry is really golden brown. Okay, the spanakopita has come out of the oven and I've allowed it to cool enough so I can handle it. You don't want it to be super hot because it's going to be really hard to get out of the tin. Now just with my palette knife, I'll carefully go underneath and then carefully take it out of the tin. Ta-da! Look how perfect it is. Now we're going to cut a little chunk and you can hear how crunchy that phyllo pastry is. Yum. And then I always like the corner part because I like the crunchiness on both sides. And then have a look inside this. Look how fantastic that is. It's set. We've used those gorgeous kaleettes and some spinach ricotta. That right there is the perfect lunch or a light dinner. Just serve it with a really lovely Greek salad. I'm gonna dig into this. Just cut a little slice. Use my hands. That is so good. That combination of cheese and the kaleettes and spinach, yummo.